Don't be afraid of saying the things that the other side believes to be true, even if it's not true. If they believe it, articulate it.
Hey Masters, it's David Hill here, and I'm with my special guest this week, Chris Voss. Hey, what's up, Chris?
Hey man, I'm doing really good. I'm happy to be with you, and life's treating me pretty well.
Good to hear it, my friend. And hey, it's an honor to have you. I just want to say too, I think your book has had more impact on my negotiating than any other book I have ever read. I'm telling you, I truly believe it's by far the most game-changing book I've ever read on negotiating.
Wow, that's really kind of you. I appreciate that. I mean, that's what we were aiming for and hoping for, so it's good to hear. Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll tell you, being in the real estate industry, that's what we pride ourselves on, being really, really great negotiators. So literally, I heard you on the James Altucher show, I'd say just over 3 weeks ago. And from hearing that interview, I bought your book on Audible. I bought your book, and I literally have been studying it, and this stuff works. And we're gonna talk about all this as we go through the interview. But first, I'd love you to share kind of one of your stories with us on kind of how you got started with negotiations. I know you have the FBI background, top lead negotiator. I know there was a story in your book where you talk about something as simple as there was a terrorist that grabbed a hostage, and by getting him to say, I think it's "that's right," you were able to get to release. Can you tell us about that story?
And way back when, it was a kidnapping in the Philippines, an American named Jeff Schilling and a terrorist named Abu Sabaya. I kind of thought it was, at the time, I took it a little bit for granted, just to clear away the debris, separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, getting somebody to say, "That's right." What difference does it make if they say "that's right"? And we needed a reset in the negotiations. We'd been floundering and struggling, and the bad guys had made up all this nonsense about why they wanted $10 million, which is shocking, right? Whenever somebody wants more than they deserve, they always come up with valid reasons for their justification, right? Terrorists aren't really any different than other human beings when they're puffing their position and coming up with more nonsense and accusations. And I didn't realize, although it's a relatively fundamental concept at the center of all this, just what a game changer was, to summarize the other side's point of view so much so that you actually take them hostage. Because when you leave somebody with nowhere to go other than to say "that's right," when you take away every argument that they have by articulating for them, it just kind of completely takes the steam out of it, and they almost kind of shake their head and are disoriented. It's really kind of a Jedi mind trick. And these guys had made up all this nonsense over why they wanted $10 million in ransom for Jeff Schilling, and they came up with 500 years of oppression, and we couldn't reason him out of it. We couldn't reason this guy into another direction. We couldn't turn his words and walk him down any path. And so finally I said, today we're just going to hit the reset switch. We're going to sort of start this all over again. The only way we can start it all over again is to take him hostage, articulate everything he's saying, and especially, don't be afraid of saying the things that the other side believes to be true, even if it's not true. If they believe it, articulate it, get it out in the air. And we got this guy on the phone, and I was coaching a guy. I'm an international negotiation coach more than anything else. And I said, we're going to do the world according to Abu Sabaya, the world according to our adversary's nonsense. And we said, it's 500 years of oppression. It's war damages. It's the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans. I mean, a complete and thorough summary of all the nonsense the other guy had been saying over months. When my guy got done doing the summary of the facts and how the other side felt about it, I mean, our bad guy, our killer, our terrorist, he goes dead silent for a second, and then he literally says, "That's right." Which, the ambassador was blown away. He said, you predicted what he was going to say. You said what you were going to make him say. And he said it word for word. Even though it was 2 words, it was the 2 most important words. And then they went silent for a second. They both just kind of sat there in the silence. And the terrorist said, let's talk again in a couple of days. And we went from $10 million to 0 in a split second in that conversation. 4 months of struggle went away in a moment by just getting the "that's right" out of the other side. And we've been using it to just transform negotiations ever since. It's crazy. It makes no sense, which I suppose emotional intelligence makes no sense. You punch people's emotional buttons because they're human beings and things change.
So let's talk about that. So when somebody does say that's right, essentially what we're doing is we're getting him to agree with us being on the same side of the table. Or, how does it actually work? Because you're right, it sounds so simple, but what does it actually do psychologically to this person? Because if I'm remembering the story, this guy was getting kind of frustrated because of all the logistics and all the questions and everything else involved in the negotiation, right?
Yeah. Well, it does two things and it's real important to remember that that's right is different than you're right. Your right is what we say to people when to some degree or another we just haven't been persuaded. And it might even be full on. We joke that the application of your right most of the time is when you say to somebody else, like, please stop talking. It's what you say to people when you want to maintain a relationship, but you just want them to shut up. And I had a business executive the other day that was telling me that he was doing a rant on his leadership team, CEO of a company, and he was really mad at all of them. And he had them in the room, and one of them said to him, "Boss, you're right." And he realized at that moment that he was so far off track because what they were trying to tell him in a polite way to shut up meant, the other side has stopped listening for some time. So that's right is not your right. So what's the difference with that's right? That's right. What we say when we don't realize we've been persuaded, we agree that what the other person just said was the complete truth. Like I guarantee you, of all your listeners, whether they be Trump fans or Hillary fans, at any moment in any of the debate, when their candidate said something they completely agreed with, they said, "That's right." You point at the screen. If you believe in what somebody just said, you go, "That's right." You don't say "you're right." You say "that's right." We just pronounce what we've heard as the complete and indisputable truth, and therefore, then we can embrace it because it's the truth, not their truth. It's the truth. And the other thing that happens is, if you're a mercenary, if you're a sociopath, you like empathy because of what it gets you. Sociopaths love to use empathy because it gets them things. So, we use empathy because we want stuff from other people. We want reciprocity. We want them to understand us. And when someone says that's right to you, what they've just done is confirmed that you've established that empathy bond with them. It's a very succinct way of them saying, I feel you understand me. And that's a very strong thing, and it moves people forward in a very powerful way.
The other thing you had mentioned, too, is, and this is something that I've been practicing, as I mentioned, studying your book for the last 3 weeks, is really articulating back to people what they say. We call it mirroring. I think you're calling it mirroring and labeling. Is that correct?
There are two things. Those are two separate skills, and I'm glad you brought it up like that. A hostage negotiator's mirroring is different from everybody else's mirroring. So what is everybody else's mirroring? Everybody else's mirroring most of the time is, I'm going to imitate your body language. If you've got your chin and your right hand up to your chin, I'm going to put my right hand up to my chin. If you're leaning against the wall and your arms are crossed, I'm going to lean against the wall. It's what people often do when they get in sync and their body movements begin to mirror one another in physicality. That's what most people think is mirroring. But a hostage negotiator's mirroring is just repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what someone has said. What someone has just said? Yeah, just repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what someone has just said. It's like it does this kind of magic connector in someone's brain. It causes people to continue and probably reword what they just said. And the difference in that is, if someone said something you didn't understand and you say, what do you mean by that? Or what does that mean? In many cases, they're going to repeat exactly what they just said, because what they just said in their brain is the perfect articulation and the perfect selection of words. A lot of people are like this. They think a lot about their words. They choose their words carefully. So when I think of what I want to say, to me, it's crystal clear. But since each of us think a little bit differently, what's crystal clear to you isn't crystal clear to me. And if I say, what do you mean by that? I'm going to be like an American overseas. I'm going to say it again, only louder. Exact same words. But if I mirror them, it causes them to reword what they say and expand on it. one time we were putting together a training session, and I wanted my director of operations to put together some notebooks, and to me, notebook was the perfect word. And what in my mind, I was actually seeing 3-ring binders, but I was calling them notebooks. And he said to me, "What do you mean by notebooks?" And I said, "Notebooks." I just repeated exactly the same word, only louder. And finally, he mirrored to me, "Notebooks?" And I said, "Yeah, 3-ring binders." And that provided the clarity, because when I said notebook, he was thinking of a folder that just had an insert in it. So mirroring is this great clarification tool that continues conversation. Now, the other thing you asked me about were labels. That's straight out of crisis intervention, hostage negotiation. We used to call them emotion labels, and you start a sentence where it seems like, or it sounds like, or even it feels like, or it appears like. It's an observation. And we use labels to label dynamics or actions or between the lines. And I might say, "I heard you say yes, but it sounds like I heard some hesitation in your voice." And that's when I've asked somebody a question, and instead of going yes, they go yes. So you label the hesitation, and it draws people out, and it's a great tool for expanding and actually uncovering problems that people would otherwise be reluctant to identify. Because if you and I are negotiating, and I say to you, "Yes, I'm really hoping that you pick up the hesitancy in my voice. I'm really hoping you do." And if you don't, actually what that tells me is you're not really listening to me. But if you do pick up on it, that's another thing that makes me feel sort of bonded to you, and I feel appreciated, and I'm going to talk more, and I might even give in because of it.
So, that's such an important point, too. I mean, you said so many powerful things right now. And I just want to go back to the mirror for a second, because what I've noticed is when you mirror somebody's words or the last couple words, a lot of times all you need to do is say the words, and then they'll elaborate on it more. You don't even have to ask a question.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You say the words, the exact, and people find this very uncomfortable until they learn how powerful it is. You don't change the words, you don't embellish the words. It's just 1 to 3 words, and then you've got to go dead silent. You got to use an effective pause. People love it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the pause is the most challenging part for a lot of people from what I've seen. And the other thing you talked about is the labeling. And again, I'm probably butchering this stuff. I met with this developer. He walked me around with his projects. And at the end, when we went and we sat down at the table, he had shared with me how, he's looking for somebody that really communicates with them the right way. And he's also looking for somebody who has access to, relocation buyers, international buyers. So he's telling me this as we're walking around the property. And when we sat at the table with his partner, I simply said to him, it seems to me that you just need someone that communicates really, really well and has access to international buyers. And the guy just looked at me like I was brilliant and looked at his business partner and ended up, again, I don't know if I butchered it or not, but it worked, even something like that. So tell me, how did I do?
No, you did great, because the other thing, too, that's kind of crazy about labels, it's like when you take a test when there's no penalty for wrong answers. Like if you're close, if you nail it, they love it. And if you miss, they want to correct you, and they dump a lot of more information. I've even had a bunch of my students, and we call it mislabeling, intentionally observing a little bit off. So the other person says, no, that's not it. This is what it is. And then they do what we call a vomit of information. The only time that a label is inappropriate is if you're using it to call somebody a name. It sounds like you're a jerk. Or if I say to you, "Look, I want you to go downstairs right now and do this," and you say, "It sounds like you want me to go downstairs right now and do this." You don't label the blatantly obvious. But if you label a dynamic, or even if you mislabel, you get a lot more information from the other side, and they love it.
So what I took from that was, he had shared a couple things with me that he was looking for. All I did was write it down on my pad, and then when we sat down later on to discuss everything, I just gave him back what he was looking for. And I think that's a great technique for sales that will benefit all of us. And I know some of us do it to an extent, I think naturally, but to me this was more purposeful. Does that make sense, or am I just way off and got lucky? Or tell me about that.
No. First of all, it's taking your time a little bit. I mean, I think I agree completely that we all have the ability to do this. we've all got some level of emotional intelligence. That's what this is. This is a systematic application of emotional intelligence. But we get in a hurry. I mean, we get in a rush to yes, or a rush to move forward. And then things get sloppy, and that's where misunderstandings come. So the minute you dial it back, I had a judge in a trial who used to love to say, let's delay in order to save time. You dial it back to make sure you get it right, and then you end up saving a tremendous amount of time overall by just taking a little bit more time up front. And yes, I agree, we all have the ability to do this.
So the other thing you talk about in the book is instead of getting people to say yes, which is pretty much common, what we've all been taught as salespeople for years, you're focusing on getting no's. And something that we started using right away, which has been just brilliant, it makes such a difference, is starting the conversations with, have I caught you at a bad time?
Yeah.
9 out of 10 people were going to say no. And then the ones that say, yes, you did, it's interesting because when you say, okay, is there a better time to get back to you? Then they'll say, well, what do you need? I got you on the phone now.
Very good. Yeah. Because the act of saying no provides protection. Therefore, if I feel I protected myself, I'll actually listen more closely. And I love the way you describe that dynamic because, you didn't intrude on the person's time. You made them feel in control. And when they said, okay, I got you on the phone now, what do you need? That's what somebody says when they're extremely focused and they've just sort of cleared their brain to listen to you. And they'll do that because they feel respected and appreciated. Otherwise, if you're pumping these people for yes, he's going to be distracted. It's going to be a highly inefficient conversation. You get somebody to say, okay, look, I got you on the phone right now. What do you need? You're now in a position for a highly focused and effective and efficient conversation. And that's what triggering no does. I mean, it helps people clarify their thoughts. Once you feel protected, you can focus. When you feel like you're being led into a trap, then you're figuratively always looking over your shoulder. You're not listening to the other person, and that's what trying to get people to say yes does. We're used to being led into the yes trap.
And people don't want to say yes, right? They don't want to feel like they're being sold something.
Yeah, they know it's a trap. Do you want to make more money? Of course I do. That's so blatantly ridiculous. I know you're baiting a trap for me. Do you drink water? Well, duh, I guess I do. All these yes trap questions, are you willing to admit that today is Monday? Well, where are you going with this? It's just, we get trapped by it all the time, and it makes people very nervous and gun-shy and concerned.
You are listening to One More Sale.
One thing, too, that you talked about was interesting. Like one of my clients, I was really struggling with her. She said she wanted to sell the property, but she wasn't really being realistic. And I can't even remember where it was, but you basically gave me the line of asking her if she wanted to fail at selling the home. And I simply had just, I was almost in frustration, Chris, really. I just said, hey, do you want us to fail at selling this house? And she was like, no, absolutely not. And she actually brought it up a couple more times. And long short, it led to a price reduction, and now we have a couple offers on the house. But tell us about that strategy.
Well, yeah, what you're trying to do is you're trying to punch through the noise, so to speak. Everybody's got a lot of stuff on their mind. You're really sort of trying to help people focus. You're trying to punch through the noise in their head. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all. The act of saying no punches through the noise. I mean, it helps people clear their heads really quickly. And no is protection, yes is commitment. Since you protected yourself, you can get focused really fast because you don't have to worry about what you've let yourself in for. It also, it triggers, saying no is oftentimes avoidance of loss. And there's Nobel Prize winning theory on how important loss avoidance is to us and how quickly we can focus our thoughts around it. So you get somebody to say no, and they get on track and focused very quickly. And that's what the whole idea is about.
Yeah, I just love it. I love that was such a perfect example of something you talked about in our interview last week. I was able to use it. It worked brilliantly. Like everything in this book, I'm telling you, game changer, my friend. So there's a couple negotiations you talk about. There's a bunch of them, but there were two that really stood out to me in the book. One was when you purchased your Toyota 4Runner.
Yeah, my salsa red pearl.
The Red Pearl. It's a great story. I encourage people to obviously read the book and listen to the audio to hear the whole story. But I mean, you went in, you wanted this truck, you found a dealership that had it, and you went and you just negotiated with this guy. And they started at $36,000, and in the end, you ended up getting it for, I want to say, $30,000, right?
Yeah. I made one offer. I brought him all the way down to my offer.
And you did it really just by using a process in your book. You talk about basically just saying, well, hey, how am I going to do that, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's a 1-2 punch, if you will. I mean, it's very soft. You know, the first thing is, and I like they used the term game changer earlier because, you know, if you're going to engage in game-changing negotiations, that means you're going to do it differently. You're not going to do it the way everybody else does. And so these things are different. This is counterintuitive, and it does work. So one of the things that was different about my entire approach with this truck is, you know, when you say what the other side's argument is, instead of reinforcing them in an argument, you leave them with nothing to say. So my whole approach here was to first leave these guys with nothing to say. You know, the truck was fantastic. You know, it was beautiful. I loved it. It was worth every dime of what they were asking for. And I'm actually embarrassed to offer less than what they're asking for. But then I go, how am I supposed to pay that?
But let me jump in. But you were actually telling him that. What you just said, you said, I'm actually embarrassed. The truck's amazing. You were telling him this, right?
Right. I said all of his arguments, I articulated them first. I left him with nowhere to go. I left him completely out of steam because normally, you know, beforehand, because I'm walking them to the how am I supposed to do that question, which is a world-class way of saying no. I mean, it works on everything from 13-year-old kids, your children, to car dealers, car salesmen, to vendors. And it has to be said properly. I mean, tone of voice is extraordinarily important. You say it deferentially. With the right tone of voice, you can get away with almost anything, particularly a great skill. So, you know, it's not, how am I supposed to do that, which is an accusation. It's, how am I supposed to do that? Like you're looking for help. You're trying to make the other side look at you in a different way. And so I know he's going to say, if I don't take away his argument, he's going to say, well, look, this truck is worth $36,000. It's a beautiful truck. You love it. You know, this is the market price. Those are all his arguments. So I say, look, these things are true. Boom, 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 boom. I list everything that he has to say, which leaves him nowhere to go. And then wham, I hit him with the how am I supposed to do that? And I brought him all the way down to my price. I didn't counter offer once.
So, they were bidding against themselves, essentially. The thing that I find really interesting about it, though, is they came back twice, right? 3 times. Like, first they came back at 34, and you're like, man, I don't know how I'm going to do that, man. I can't do it. And then they came back again at 32, and you're like, man, I guess my question to you is, well, at what point would you have just said, all right, would you have paid 32? Would you have walked? Or how do you know when enough is enough?
The way you know is when they give you the answer that everybody's horrified to hear, which actually stuns people because they say, if I say to this guy, how am I supposed to do that? Then he's going to say, because you have to. You figure it out. If you want it, you got to do it. You know, what if they say that? And my answer is, that's perfect. That's actually, you need to keep saying, how am I supposed to do that till they do say that to you. Because a negotiator's job is to find out how much room there is to push. And that's the answer that tells you they're at their limit. So you should, in fact, keep, you know, interspersing it with empathy, tactical use of empathy, taking their arguments away, and continue to ask a question. When they finally say, because if you want the truck, you'll do it. You figure it out. That's when you know you've done your job to the fullest extent. And that's when either you make the deal or you walk away. That's what you want.
Perfect, man. Love it. That's great. That makes sense. The other story was you were negotiating with a kidnapper, and in the end, I forget the whole details of it, but I know in the end, your goal was to set a specific number of what they would pay, and then at the end, you finalized or you sealed it by adding a radio, and then the guy knew there was no more money. So tell us about that, using specific numbers.
Well, when you go back and forth on bargaining, you know, you should have an entire system. I mean, and we got a system in the book. It's called the Ackermann System. And it beats high anchors every time. And you have graduated counteroffers. Every counteroffer has got to be in decreasing increments. And then when you get to the final number, there's something crazy about odd numbers. People just don't question odd numbers. 4751, we wanted to get in under $5,000 when the market price for victims at the time is anywhere from $15,000 to $75,000. And then after we've graduated them through this with these decreasing changes, decreasing increments, because they feel it's slowed down, and we're hitting them basically with 3 psychological tools in a row. The first is the decreasing increments. The second is the odd number. And then finally, the third is when they really feel like they push you to the max, you're throwing out something non-monetary that they don't want. With kidnappers, it was like a radio or shoes, a stereo. And it's the exact same principle in any other type of bargaining, because kidnappers are commodities dealers, they're businessmen. It's horrible to think of it in those terms, but that's a reality. So, you hit them with 3 straight psychological tools. Each one of them gets them a little bit more, and then bang, you got them. You cut the deal.
Yeah, I'm just, I thought it was amazing, just the whole story. Again, people really got to go out and read the book or listen to it, and you're really going to get it. The other thing, the email. Here's another one. If somebody, I shared a story with you about, trying to get into this community for a long time. I had a meeting with the executive director, and he had sent me an email the day before and saying, hey, I need to reschedule. Then he didn't respond again to emails for weeks. He wouldn't take my calls. I tried everything, and then finally I sent him that email just saying, hey, have you given up on having us sell some of your units for you? And I got a response back probably 4 hours later. It was just amazing. And then the exact same thing with a seller, almost exact same situation. She canceled a meeting on me via text. I tried getting in touch with her for weeks, nothing, ignoring my text, ignoring my call, email. I sent her a simple text that says, have you given up on selling the house? And within 2 minutes, Chris, she responded, my kids are having a real issue with this. We don't want to do anything till after the holidays. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy the way that works. I mean, if anything, we're batting pretty much 1,000 on. It's that. Have you given up on? And people want to respond immediately, and it triggers those 2 things. I mean, it triggers. They're protecting themselves from loss. It clarifies their thinking. The answer is no. They're not committing themselves to anything other than avoiding loss. And people are more likely to make a move to avoid a loss than they are to accomplish a gain. It's like trying to feed somebody who's not hungry. That's when you're accomplishing a gain. You're offering somebody something, and they may just be happy the way they are. But as soon as you show the specter of loss, that motivates people. Like, bang, we've got to avoid the loss. And just exactly what happened to you. Guy's not coming back for weeks. 4 hours later, you've got an answer. Another client not talking to you at all for days, weeks. You send a text. 2 minutes later, you get an answer. And the clarification, maybe it doesn't necessarily give you the answer you want, but the first point is you get an answer instead of wondering, which makes you smarter.
Communication.
Yeah, exactly.
It almost seems like you're calling him a quitter too, right? You're like, well, since you've given up, right? Is that part of that part of it too?
It might be that, I think it's another one of those things that hits people on about 3 levels emotionally, and when you can hit 3 levels, you get a powerful reaction. And some of it, that may well be it. I think that's probably part of it. The sophisticated way to say, are you a quitter? And nobody wants to be a quitter.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you mentioned that you'd be willing to do some type of a role play with me. Is that still something you're willing to do?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. So why don't I be a seller, and you can be an agent, and basically you're meeting with me, and you want to get me to list the house at the right price that's going to cause it to sell.
Okay.
And I understand you don't have much real estate experience, so if you butcher this, we won't hold it against you.
All right. Well, what's your vision here? What's your vision for selling your property? What do you see?
So I'm moving to Florida. I have a relocation job. It's starting in February, so I need to be out there for February.
All right. So it sounds like there's a few things you're trying to get ahead of here.
Yeah, and I want to list the house for, say the house is worth $450, but I want to list it for $550.
Okay. All right. So do you want to let the house linger on the market?
No, of course not.
All right. So it sounds to me like moving it forward as expeditious as possible is pretty valuable to you.
Well, I mean, yeah, it'd also be pretty valuable to get that extra money.
Right. I hear some hesitation in your voice. So you're trying to decide in your mind which one is more important, whether or not you get a quick sale or whether or not you maximize your return.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
So how long do you want it to linger on the market?
Well, I mean, I don't really want it to linger on the market. I was just kind of hoping maybe we could sell it, at least try for the higher number, see what happens, and then, go from there.
Okay, well, that's a great approach. And what you're faced with here is coming in at a higher number to sort of test the market is a great way to test the market. You need the luxury of time there. And what'll happen is you test the market is more than likely you come in at a price that's too high, you're gonna have absolute silence for 30 to 60 days. You're going to get no response whatsoever. And, that's good feedback because then you've just spent 30 to 60 days finding out that your price is too high. Now, at that point in time, to come down incrementally, the real issue is how expensive is it for you to linger on the market? I mean, how much of a loss are you willing to incur while you're trying to precisely call the market?
Well, I mean, I don't want to lose any money. I mean, that's what I mean. I'd rather, try to gain as much as I can. Right.
So one of the questions here is which is more valuable? Having it linger on the market for an extended period of time and maybe getting, we're talking about possibly 10, 15% increase over a long period of time, or having the money available to you to spend sooner, which then you can put it to good use sooner.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if I'd rather get the money so that it's available to me. Yeah, that would make more sense.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you're not really willing to test the market over an extended period of time just to get the last few $1,000s.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I mean, I'd like to actually test the market and see if I can get that. I just don't want to do it. Obviously, I need to be in Florida for February.
Okay, all right. So it sounds to me like you are willing, or you're not willing to let it linger past February.
Well, I can't let it linger past February. I mean, I have to be moved in February. I mean, I have to be there for February.
Okay, now I'm going to step back a little bit from the conversation because the other thing, too, I don't know the market velocity of what you're talking about down there as well. But what I was trying to do specifically back and forth, the combination of open-ended questions and, the no-oriented questions, like I'm trying to make you feel as in control as possible. And the open-ended questions are designed to try to trigger your vision as to how you want things to work out. Now, I'll give you a separate example. If I had more market data on this particular market at this given point in time, because there was a kidnapping again, and a kidnapping is a commodity exchange. I'm working a kidnapping in Haiti, and I said to the father of a 12-year-old American boy who was kidnapped, he was a dual national, so he was Haitian, but he was born in the United States. When he found out I was in Washington, D.C., he literally said to me on the phone, because I'm talking to him on the phone, he's in Haiti. He says, "You're in Washington, D.C., how are you going to help me?" And I said, okay, so what you're faced with here is, while Haitians kill each other at the drop of a hat, they don't kill kidnap victims. Now, why they do that, I have no idea. I just know that they're not killing kidnap victims, and they are killing each other constantly, Haitian criminals. Now, at this point in time, today is Thursday, and Haitian kidnappers love to party on Saturday night. So if you follow what I'm asking you to do, we'll have you sent out by Friday evening or Saturday morning. And what I did to him when I said that was I laid out the challenges that he was faced with and the specifics of the market, at which point in time he doesn't care. And he never asked me how many Haitian kidnappings I'd worked. He never asked me how long I'd been a hostage negotiator. He didn't ask me if I'd ever even been to Haiti. I'd never been to Haiti, although I worked hundreds of Haitian kidnappings. When I laid out exactly what his challenges were, I told him what he faced. Then he knew that I understood the market and he was willing to accept my guidance. He said, "Tell me what you want me to do." So when you've got a seller who's priced too high unrealistically, then tell them what they're faced with. Lay the challenges out just so that they know you understand the market. So as when we were talking back and forth in the velocity of the market, like, I sold a boat a couple of years ago when I left Washington, D.C., and we priced it high intentionally early to test the market, and I had time. I expected it to take months and months and months. So if I was under time pressure, As my broker could have said, look, we can test this market and we can parse it down when we get you a really accurate price. Here's the market data. Here's the market turnover. Here's how, at this price, here's how long this is going to take us to find something out. We come in too high, we're not going to hear anything for 3 months that will successfully tell us that we're in too high. That's how long it's going to take. So if you can tell if you got a seller who wants to come in at a high price, my view is you say, okay, this is what this move will do. We can sit here for silence and burn up 3 months, and we will have successfully learned that we're in too high. Now we're talking about percentages, and I want you to decide what those percentages are. This is what will happen if we want it to linger. And then do you want it to linger like this? I mean, it's a combination of explaining the market to them, make sure they feel in control the entire time, and then, the reality checks, we might say, to come to Jesus moments, have to be designed around no-oriented questions.
Love it, man. Yeah, and again, I know with obviously you don't sell real estate for a living, and without having the knowledge on the market and those components, it would obviously make it a lot more challenging. So I appreciate your example of the kidnapping. There were a couple things you did, though, even without that knowledge. I mean, you put me in some pain in the beginning, not being able to achieve my goal. You also broke it down to two things in the end, which was you can either have the house sit on the market, or you can take your money and do something else with it, right? Was that intentional?
Yes, absolutely. Because I'm asking questions that are designed to get you to see things. I mean, some people refer to them as visioning questions. What do you see? So here's a possibility. If you give it to people in choices, they're more likely to accept the vision as opposed to fighting it. Another way to do that, when you want to point some particular direction out to somebody, another way to say is, what would happen if? The if is a verb-led question, and what is an open-ended question. You're combining the dynamics of an open-ended question with the verb-led, which is focusing on something specific, but the purpose of saying what first, what would happen if, makes someone in complete control, feel in complete control, and they don't realize that you just focus them down right on one specific objective to make them confront that objective.
So what would happen if?
Right. What would happen if we test the market for 2 months and we get no response?
Love it. So that's a similar question that we ask is along the lines of, well, what's your plan B if the house doesn't sell? Right.
And there's a real good chance that they might not have a plan B. You want them to see that. So you're giving them even a little more clarity on it. Well, what would happen if this lingers for 2 months?
I love that. Love it. All right, and the other really important point too, and I appreciate you doing that role play, without really any coaching on my part or anything, because again, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of us will try to go into these negotiations, but we don't have the details and we don't have the facts, and we're obviously not going to be as effective without those details, those components. So that said, man, hey, I just again want to appreciate your time. Really, the book is phenomenal. I encourage everybody to read it. I've been going over and over it. I know we're going to be talking to you about having you come down for an event, so super excited about that. So that said, were there any questions that I should have asked you, Chris, that I didn't ask you?
No, but I'd like to point your listeners at another resource if they're interested. The twice-a-month complimentary negotiation newsletter that we put out. The name of our newsletter/blog is called The Edge, how to get the negotiation edge. And we put it out, it's complimentary. And a real simple way to sign up to subscribe to it is just to text the words "that's right" with no spaces and no punctuation. So it's THATSRIGHT to the number 22828. And that number again is 22828. If you send "that's right" to it, which is a better answer than yes, you want people to say "that's right" to get a great connection. It's a way to get better at negotiation. You get twice a month, you get it in your inbox, and you get some great ideas on how to be a better negotiator.
Love it. That's awesome. And the name of your company is Black Swan, Chris?
We are the Black Swan Group, and the website is blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWANLTD.com.
I love the metaphor from the book when you talk about a black swan. What is a black swan?
Well, the impact of the highly improbable, the innocuous things that don't seem like they're that important, but they create tipping points, so they create catalysts, so they make all the difference in the world. To use a Tony Robbins metaphor, the 2 millimeter change that ends up being worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars, thousands.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're selling a house, you're in a negotiation, and you find out through the other agent from him making a mistake that, the seller's, has a medical issue and they have to sell the house because they need the money right away. That would be considered a black swan, correct?
Right, exactly. What's really going on behind the scenes, you can trigger a response without asking a question, because questions tend to make people defensively. So how do I trigger you into responding without actually asking you a question? That's one of the things that we do.
Final question, Chris, is, what is the one thing you want our listeners to take from this interview?
If you take a step back in your interactions and let the other side fill the void, you'll find other people talking themselves into your deal more often than not. So with a little bit of patience, you actually get things done much more quickly.
Love it. So you're talking about that pause that's so hard for all of us.
Oh, yeah. It could be, if you're not used to it, it could feel excruciating, which means it feels excruciating for the other side. And if you can hold out, they're going to throw something on the table. Maybe 75% of the time, that's going to be to your benefit.
Awesome, my friend. And what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Sign up for the newsletter, because since it comes out twice a month, we have contact information in there. We've got one-day training sessions that's just for our clientele, just for subscribers that we put out. So the newsletter is really the best way to stay good at negotiations and stay in touch with us.
Chris, hey, man, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. It's an absolute pleasure being on with you. Thanks for having me on.